Wednesday hangout.
The names keep changing just to protect our identities.
I love the Wednesday hangout.
I know we do too. And today's topic is, as you know, some of you, recognizing.
I think it's even a question.
Oh, can we recognize our omniscience? Now, I originally planned that we were going to open with a very special quote on omniscience. The problem was, in realizing that we all are omniscients, we figured you probably knew them already.
I heard a little background laugh even.
I did too.
Okay, so if you didn't catch the beautiful opening funny, as I love that Dr. Eric keeps us laughing all the time, the definition, which is, depending on where you look it up, the noun definition of omniscience is the state of knowing everything. The notion of divine omniscience is something we hear a lot about in the religious realm often, or in theology.
In theology.
Spirituality.
In the Oxford Dictionary, it was there too.
Yes. But let's play deeply with this enormous suggestion. I'm going to say it's a suggestion because I don't know that even though we speak about knowingness or omniscience, that we actually live the understanding of this state of knowing everything. And is it possible? And really, from where and how could we possibly ever recognize this?
It's, you know, being omniscient it's a getting beyond yourself to perceive yourself. So sometimes when we're so in ourselves, we don't perceive ourselves fully, and we don't therefore perceive our own omniscience.
I'm going to go back to what you just said, though, because if you slow that way down, like get beyond yourself in order to perceive yourself, it almost sounds like one of those quick little, get on with it. It's a meme, almost a meme. But if you slow that way down, there is a hidden omniscience in the very statement.
Mm-hmm.
Getting beyond yourself in order to perceive yourself. The suggestion, the omniscience would lend itself to something far greater than a belief, far greater than a thought, a feeling. How does one get beyond the self in order to perceive the self? I'm going to take the your out of it. What is beyond? And what is the self? And for that matter, what is perception? So these are three huge things. Put in the chat, because we need you guys active. Wednesdays are active sharing and kind of diving in and unpacking some ways of looking at life itself. And so, put in the chat, how do we get beyond infinite all-knowingness? How would you get beyond the self? And what does it mean to perceive the self? Anything that comes to you. Anything.
So are we talking about the self as being limitless?
Explain to me how the self becomes limitless.
Well, that's why I'm asking. Are we suggesting that the self is limitless? Because we can't really get beyond limitless, can we?
Okay, well, certainly.
But what I was going to suggest is that our perception may be limited, and therefore, are we getting beyond the limitations of our own perception? Because our limitless self, our limitless existence, being awareness, we can only become more and more aware of.
Sometimes we hear it as the true self. I personally prefer my true nature. the nature of what I would say is my I am. So again, we love this idea of getting beyond the self in order to perceive, we'll say, the true nature, our infinite self, not the finite self. And maybe that's another way to kind of consider it.
Yeah.
Getting beyond the finite self in order to perceive the infinite self.
I know that in the experiences that we have, and most everyone has, with the reconnective healing intelligence, we become aware of things that our conscious thinking mind says can't be, isn't there, doesn't exist, and yet it exists so clearly and plainly within all of our recognized senses, and then some senses we haven't even thought of beyond smell and touch and taste and vision and sound, and even allowing us to cross senses, so we start, feeling colors and smelling numbers and hearing visions. It just continuously expands.
So how does that fit into this idea of recognition of omniscience, recognition of being in a state of knowing everything? And I think what you're touching on is so important. In reconnective healing, we often consider that energy, light, and information, that the intelligence of reconnective healing does this thing.
Yeah, it does.
And we always talk about it as show me me. Show me me. In other words, how can this exchange, this receiving of energy, light, and information allow us to become the instrument of experience? So going back to the idea of getting beyond the finite self in order to perceive the infinite self, we might suggest that the frequencies allow us to become the instrument of the infinite's experience. We become the experience for omniscience, for the all-knowing, for knowingness. We can play in being the know and the knower, or to know and the knower, in order to find a sense of knowingness. And I'd like us to explore this concept today around what might it mean to you to become the instrument of experience, the instrument of the infinite self. What does this mean? You have to read the chat because my contacts are playing games.
So, Justin wrote in mathematical calculations, infinity arises when dividing a number by zero also produces an error, or when dividing a number by zero and also produces an error. I'm not sure if there's an extra word in that sentence. If I were to translate this into a relatable concept to approach and exceed infinity in our lives, I think we should realize that the idea of nothing doesn't exist, and our perception of what we see as some sort of nothingness is just untapped potential.
Okay. And I'm going to raise the question, is there a difference between infinity and infinite and the infinite? What is the difference between infinity and the infinite? Is there? So if you look it up, the idea of infinite technically is this, it's language, it's an adjective. Like this page is white. Similarly, this series of events is infinite, but infinity is actually the noun. It means a certain quantity which is not a fixed number, but bigger than any given number. So either way, when we look at this idea from a mathematical calculation, there is still some element of what we'll call space and time involved in it somewhere. So we're going to go beyond that. And is this just part of the body-mind experience?
Or is the body-mind experience just part of infinity or the infinite?
In the chat, let's get really active here. Again, we're exploring, can you recognize omniscience? Can you recognize this expression of a state of knowing everything? And, you know, I'm going to assume some of you have had some experience with the reconnective healing expression, the receiving. Have you ever experienced, and I use the word experienced because we really have no capacity to express something outside of what is our experience. Have you experienced a sense of just knowing everything? I know people who have had near-death experiences speak of this. They were in a state of knowing everything. Something about their after-death or near-death experience claimed a state of pure knowingness.
And then, and claimed is a funny word. It wasn't that they claimed it like, is it or isn't it real? It claimed it for them. It was very real. As a matter of fact, very many of them report coming back in the knowingness that it is being what they were aware of there, taken away, scaled down, limited down, not necessarily to have full cognizant access to while we're here.
Part of what I love in the exploration of this is something I heard Rupert Spira say, which was, when my thoughts, feelings, experiences, relationships, sensations, activities lose their power to veil the peace of my true nature, I am in recognition. I am omniscience. So this idea of being the experience of infinite, the projection or the isolated aspect of awareness, meaning breaking off from awareness. We talk about this in your daily awake mind, thought-filled, belief-established, feeling, sensations, memories, time, life. Then you are, again, part of awareness going to sleep in order to perceive itself through the mind, right? And then when we go to sleep and we go into nothing, in your dream, if you have no dream, but you've been sleeping, you have no thought. You have no thoughts that you are cognizant of in any way. So it's as if the infinite aspect of you awakes, right? And in that, there are no thoughts, feelings, experiences, relationships. You don't even have a sense of time. I don't have a sense of time when I sleep. It's only when you awake that you perceive again time. So how can we live in the recognition that omniscience is an aspect of what we are, right?
Yeah.
Knowingness is an aspect of what we are. And one of the suggestions is we recognize this when our thoughts and feelings, experiences, relationships, sensations, activities lose their power to veil the peace of our true nature. I think that's a huge challenge. We're in this era where everything's a challenge. Everything on social media is take the challenge. We'd like to challenge everyone in our Wednesday Live at this moment to look at that opportunity. How often do the thoughts and feelings, experiences, relationships, activities, sensations, if you have pain in your body because you're struggling with an imbalance or a disease, how often can the sensation of pain even take over the awareness of your true nature.
And it causes us to experience what we perceive of as time in many different ways. When we're in a lot of pain, time seems to go really, really slowly. And when we open up a quart of ice cream, we look down, and in a second, it just seems to be empty. So there's a different thing. I remember what I used to describe as the last 5 minutes before the school bell rang for me were the longest 2 hours that ever existed.
Yes.
You know, just in those 5 minutes long. I like to read what Grazia B shared with us.
Great.
She says, the spirit is infinite as it transcends its manifestation in a physicality, as is conditioned by the coordinates of space and time.
Yes.
A condition of its manifestation and expressiveness, but also a limitation to its infinite essence.
It's magnificent and so lyrical. It's poetic, because you almost have to find some component of poetry to even find this discussion. How would you simplify that into a really basic statement? Just give that a go, because boy, you really, this is almost the conversation of sustaining the states of wakeful awareness, right?
Now, by the way, just to avoid distraction and wonder, when you see me reach like this, it's to be able to read your comments in the chat. So it's allowing me to scan up and down and see what you're saying and share some of them with everyone. I know that some of what Grazia B was talking about, we're going to touch on at some point today, which will be areas of awareness we allow ourselves to be cognizant of, not be cognizant of, and yet still interact with, and how it plays with our individual minds and how our minds are part of a greater mind. But we'll touch on all that in just a little bit.
I'm going to read just quickly something I received around this question, can we recognize our omniscience? And someone wrote just yesterday to me to say, we are being freed up and weaned off many toxic realities, including the ones of our own making that have long threatened our sovereignty and siphoned our life force. This is to help us remember how to cultivate and personally facilitate our independence in